We have lots to discuss in tonight's video, including the latest trade talk around the NHL. Tonight's trade rumors focusing on teams like the Ottawa Senators, New York Rangers, and the latest on the drama in Vancouver. Plus, we have a waiver claim today. Arthur Kaliyev is done with the Los Angeles Kings. We have several injury updates, including a couple of big ones in Toronto and Ottawa, and a big update on the Sharks captain Logan Couture. Plus, the World Junior Championships have come to a close. The U.S. have won gold for back-to-back tournaments. Plus, we have a big update as well on potential expansion and the return of the Arizona Coyotes. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here today. Before we dive into a lot of the other hockey news, I just want to acknowledge the fact that the hockey world, the NHL, has lost another legend, unfortunately. Al McNeil has passed away at the age of 89. Al McNeil, of course, was a player, a coach, and an executive over a long span in the NHL. Was actually the very first Maritimer to be an NHL head coach. He born in Nova Scotia, went on to be a coach with the Montreal Canadiens. As a rookie head coach, won the Stanley Cup. Is a three-time Cup winner. All, of course, came after his playing days and his other roles. He was an executive with the Flames as well for a while. So McNeil, like I said, just one of those lifelong hockey people. Was well-respected, well-liked. Like I said, a good Maritimer. And, of course, like I said, unfortunately, at the age of 89, he's no longer with us. So Al McNeil, certainly want to wish his friends and family our condolences. Certainly a great long life and career in the game of hockey. Some other updates as well quickly here from the Department of Player Safety. Max Domi of the Toronto Maple Leafs has been fined for $5,000 for an elbowing incident that happened in their game the other night against the Philadelphia Flyers against enforcer Garnet Hathaway. Of course, we saw Hathaway also get tangled up with Jake McCabe. I believe there was something that happened before that. If I'm not mistaken, I think Hathaway bumped the goalie. I can't remember. There's been so many games I've watched here in the past couple of days between the NHL and the World Juniors, but McCabe got hurt, and it looked bad. And we don't know exactly the extent of McCabe's injuries, but he was officially placed on injured reserve today. It looks like, when you watch it in real slow-mo and kind of try to blow it up, that Hathaway kind of kicks at McCabe, and I think his knee gets him in the face. It's kind of what it looks like. Probably dealing with a concussion, which is unfortunate, especially, if I'm not mistaken, I think he has history in that regard as well. So never something you want to see. Not good news at all. And, of course, we don't have a timeline on McCabe's return because those types of injuries are very, very difficult to kind of evaluate and determine the recovery period. But unfortunate news for the Leafs. Domi gets fined, which I'm sure he probably doesn't really care too much about. On to some other injury updates. We got some big news out of Ottawa. They had a very eventful practice this morning. Unfortunately, not all of it was good. Things started off with a laughing matter with Shane Pinto going on the ice and leaving his skate guards on, having a good fall, but of course he was fine. That was just something that his teammates were having a good laugh with him over. But then later in practice, Jacob Bernard-Docker went hard into the boards and looked to suffer a serious leg injury. I did see a clip of the play that one of the media members had posted that was there attending practice, and it looks like they were just doing a drill. The puck gets shot in. JBD and one of the forwards are going in after. They're getting set for a puck battle. But as JBD kind of goes into the boards, it looks like he just lost an edge and went in hard. And you could tell he was in serious pain. The look on his face, like you could tell it was an intensely painful situation. So we don't really know the status of anything right now, but I think it's probably fair to assume that they may be dealing with a long-term injury there. The Sens decor, especially on the right side now, suddenly getting tested mightily with Hamonic being out 2 to 4 weeks, and then Nick Jensen should be able to play, hopefully, in Detroit tomorrow night, but he has been battling a bit of a flu bug or illness, so I believe his energy levels have certainly been impacted there. So not great for the Senators. They did recall Jan Yannick, of course, who had a terrific training camp. A lot of people thought he may have an inside job at the fourth-line center role. It was injured fairly early into the AHL season, missed a bunch of time. So now he'll get his chance. So we'll see where they intend to put him here in the lineup. A couple updates on Montreal. They're playing tonight on the Amazon Prime game against the Vancouver Canucks, an all-Canadian matchup. And we have still no David Savard and no Patrick Laine. So they remain out of the lineup tonight. On Vancouver's side, Quinn Hughes, which was a game-time decision, is in the lineup. But I know during the pregame that the Amazon shows, you could tell that Quinn Hughes has his hand heavily taped. So whatever he's dealing with, definitely some sort of hand injury, and I would guess that it's not completely healed. This is something he's going to try to play through. Also with Vancouver, they updated that Dakota Joshua is going to be out week to week after suffering a lower body injury. Looks like a knee the other night against the Nashville Predators. Now, a fairly big update as well on San Jose Sharks captain Logan Couture, who has not appeared or played yet this year. It sounds, the reports out of the Sharks reporters, that he's not really progressing. And there is speculation that, it's not official yet, but there's speculation that sometime here soon they may just shut him down and, stop the recovery process or stop the return process, if you will, for this year. And just take the rest of the season off, reevaluate in the offseason. It sounds like things are trending in that direction. He has missed so much time the last couple of years. I really have to wonder if his career might be over, but of course we don't know that just yet. That's a little premature. But unfortunately for Logan Couture, it's trending like that might, unfortunately, be the case. Now, as I mentioned, we also had big news on the NHL waiver wire today. We knew the LA Kings had Arthur Kaliyev on waivers. As I talked about yesterday, there was a lot of people speculating that because of the connection to ownership and management, that he might get picked up by the Ottawa Senators. Unfortunately for them, even if they were going to do that, which we'll never know, the process never even made it to them, because he was picked up by the New York Rangers, who was obviously much lower in the standings right now. So the Rangers get Kaliyev. So he's a pure sniper type of goal scorer. Unfortunately, there are other holes in his game that obviously has caused him to not be a regular, or to kind of fall out of favor, if you will, in LA. But he's been wanting a fresh start for a while. Wouldn't be shocked to see him get in the lineup and be injected with motivation and end up maybe getting a hot start. We'll see. It could be a good pickup. If it doesn't work out, maybe he ends up on waivers again. It's hard to say. He's not signed long for very much money, so it's a no risk, basically, potentially high reward kind of situation for any team, and the Rangers could use a jolt here. So we'll see how they make out with the Arthur Kaliyev era beginning in the Big Apple. Now, as I mentioned, we also had a longtime NHL veteran retired today, Alex Chiasson, of course, who was a first-round pick of the Dallas Stars way back, has retired after appearing in the NHL over several years with 7 different clubs, including many Canadian clubs. Played over 650 games in his career. Made an appearance in parts of multiple years with 4 different Canadian teams, including Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, and the Ottawa Senators. I know he was originally started off in Dallas, had a good start to his young career, and he was the centerpiece going to the Ottawa Senators in the Jason Spezza trade when he was traded out of Ottawa to the Dallas Stars. Of course, we know at the time Spezza was the Sens captain and had decided that he wanted to move on, so he had asked the team to move him, ended up going to Dallas, and that's what the return was. There was other pieces too, but he was the centerpiece, so certainly a letdown for Ottawa, and no disrespect to Chiasson, but they had higher hopes of what he was able to live up to, and he ended up becoming a bit of a journeyman. Never really ended up on a team for an extended period of time. Now, the other 2 teams, like I said, besides the Canadian clubs he played for, also played for Dallas and Washington. Washington's where he achieved the most success, getting the Stanley Cup, of course. I ended up getting a Stanley Cup in 650 games. So good luck to Alex Chiasson with whatever comes next. There's also word that the Montreal Canadiens, who we've talked about Jake Evans off and on, maybe being a trade piece for Montreal. According to Renaud Lavoie, TVA Sports, they have engaged with Evans' camp now and the contract extension discussions. Now, this doesn't mean 100% he's going to get signed and he's going to stay, but clearly there is at least some level of interest to get it done. I really think this is going to boil down to what they're comfortable with. Obviously, Evans is having a career season right now. This happens a lot. And sometimes teams end up overpaying. They regret it later. And sometimes they'll be like, listen, we like you as a player. You've been here a long time. You're having a career season. We acknowledge that. But we can only go to this level. For you to stay and have a longer future with the club, it has to be this number. And if he's willing to take that, then maybe he stays. And if not, because they do have lots of young players coming up, they obviously need to clear a few roster spots to give some more of their youth an opportunity. Like I said, next year you're likely not going to see the returns of guys like Armia and Dvorak. They'll open up a couple of spots, but a lot of talk internally. Do they re-sign Jake Evans, or do they try to push maybe a guy like Owen Beck to kind of take that role next year, who they have high hopes for as well? So, or even Kapanen, who had a really good showing earlier this year. So hard to say where things go with the Evans extension, but they're discussing it at least. So there is interest, and it's really going to boil down to money, because they're also going to have to weigh that out with potential returns. And I think the returns on him would be really good. So they have to we'll see where it goes. There's no big rush, but something that they definitely want to make a decision on and get done before the deadline, for sure. Now, the World Junior Championships have come to a close, and for the back-to-back time, for the first time in their history, Team USA has won gold. They defeated Finland yesterday in overtime. Heck of a game, I will say that. I know, being a Canadian person and a Canadian fan myself, sometimes it's a little harder to get into it when Canada's not in the medal round or in the gold medal match, but that was a heck of a hockey game. And to be completely honest, I was highly entertained. Finland dominated early on, got the early lead, but then eventually, and kind of as the game went on, the U.S. kind of took over. They dominated the third period. You could tell they were hungry for it, and they had so much talent, such a deep team. Like I said, going into this tournament, I thought Canada would do better, because they didn't have that star power this year, but I thought maybe from a depth perspective that they might be able to be a force with their U.S. I was like, okay, they have the high-end talent. I don't know that they have the depth, but the high-end talent carried them even when the depth didn't pitch in. But the depth did in a big way, with Stiga getting the golden goal, his first shot on goal in the entire tournament, and it's the game winner in a gold medal match. So certainly a huge goal for him that he'll always remember. And for the first time ever, the Americans go back-to-back gold medal. Next year, the World Juniors are in Minnesota, so they're going to look to three-peat on home soil. Looks like the way the groups are going to be done up, you're going to have Canada, USA, and Sweden all in the same group, which means they'll all play each other in the preliminary round, so it could be a dogfight again. And I do expect, like I said, the Finns are always competitive. Czechia has been really good the last few years. Latvia has shown this year they can be better, although their top player is aging out, so he'll be moving on. But, at the same time, I think this tournament could be even more competitive next year. It's going to be hard to say. I do expect that the Americans, at the very least, will be in the mix for sure, again, for a potential three-peat. So we'll see where it goes. But it was a pretty solid tournament overall, with lots of great young players. Ryan Leonard, of course, Capitals pick, who's going to be a force in the NHL. He could be there now, to be honest. There's no doubt. But he wanted to try to win another gold medal, and he also wanted to try to win a championship with his college team. Of course, the BC Eagles are flying, and that's the other advantage that team had, is all three of the top-line players on the American team, they all play together. They're all college line mates. Between Perreault and Leonard have been playing together for like 4 or 5 years. They lost Will Smith to the NHL last year. Now, projected first overall pick James Higgins comes in and replaces him. It's almost unfair, to be honest. But terrific tournament by the Americans, well-deserved gold medal. Now, could we see some expansion? We know there's been talks about it off and on, and the return of the Arizona Coyotes. We have some updates. Some things are in the works to try to help make that happen. I know updates from fourthperiod.com. David Pagnotta says that he expects there in the next year or two that they're definitely going to expand. The belief is we're probably going to see them go to 34 teams first, so probably 2 more teams. The belief is that the leading contenders right now is Atlanta. We know there's multiple groups in Atlanta, and a lot of progress has already been made in a new building and everything. The NHL really wants to be in that market. I know they've been there twice and it's failed, but at the end of the day, it's a huge market, and it's something they feel can work. So they're gonna try again if the situation is right. And then you get the Houston market, which is also huge, untapped. A pretty good chance. No guarantees, of course, but if I had to make a bet today, I'd say that Houston and Atlanta become the next two expansion franchises sometime. I mean, I don't even know when they're going to officially make the process open. I'd say sometime this year was my gut instinct. I said before the draft, before free agency, like sometime this summer would be my best prediction, is when they formally open the process, and then maybe within a year after that, we'll get confirmation of Atlanta and Houston being the teams. And then from there, I think by the time we get to within 5-6 years is probably when we're going to see the two more teams. And I think 36 will be where it probably caps. And you're going to see possibly, if things go well, the return of the Coyotes and then one other team in the Eastern Conference. Now, so today down in Arizona, Maricopa County announced that they have a new committee that they've put together of business and political leaders with the sole purpose of bringing back the NHL and bringing back the Coyotes to the area. So obviously, you've got a group of people there. I mean, obviously, they're not going to own the team, but business and political leaders that are now, lobbying for the team instead of working against them, which was a huge part of what the issue was there. I think a lot of it, they just haven't had the right owner. Like the last guy here, of course, he rubbed everybody the wrong way and certainly just upset everybody. Nobody wanted to work with him. But Gary Bettman is already aware of this and has already had conversations with this committee as well, by the way. So obviously, things progress. We know how much Gary loves Arizona. There's some that wonder, because there was some comments before that there's some belief out there that NBA Suns owner Matt Ishbia could get involved. He had expressed some desire, so at least I'm not sure what level of interest, but some at least, to bring the NHL back to the area. Could they, and could he end up opening both franchises? Hard to say. The big thing, though, before the NHL goes back, they 100% have to get the arena situation figured out. So if that can be sorted and they can have a team in the next 4 or 5 years, I think that's probably the timeline that we're looking at here. Because it would have been 3 under the old ownership and everything that we had heard last year before they moved to Utah. So I think we're kind of progressing in the same sort of timeline with an extra year or two beyond that to get everything in order. So we'll see. So expansion, I think 2 phases is the latest intel, the latest speculation, and the Coyotes could be part of that as this new committee pushes to try to help bring the team back. Now, some more details in the trade rumor mill. We've got a couple of things we want to look at. One in Ottawa, and then, of course, all the stuff in Vancouver. We'll start with the Sens. I know there's lots of talk about the goaltending situation. Obviously, will they move Forsberg? Will they waive him? Will they bring in somebody else that can be more stable and be a more stabilizing force with the uncertainty around how long Linus Ullmark's going to be out? Elliot Friedman addressed this on his 32 Thoughts podcast this morning. Basically, it was because there was a lot of talk about John Gibson. Do they go out and bring in Gibson? And he's like, he's not convinced that they will, because Gibson also has quite the injury rap sheet in history as well. Do they want to bring in one injured goalie to kind of help work with the other injured goalie? If this is going to become a thing with Ullmark where he's, unfortunately, you hope it doesn't, but, you need something more stable. So he seems to think that they're definitely, looking at the market and trying to figure out where the next goalie comes from if they're going to bring somebody in. But he doesn't seem to be convinced that Gibson is the solution. So we will see where that goes. The other big thing right now, the other problem is that we've already seen a few goalie moves, and there's a lot of teams still in the race. If you look at the Eastern Conference playoff race, it's really tightened up in the past 4 or 5 days. At one point, the Sens were locked down that number 2 wildcard spot, and they had a cushion of like 4 or 5 points. That is gone now. The Penguins have caught up, and you got Montreal, Detroit. There's 6 or 7 teams within 4. If you look at the team holding down the final spot, I think there's 7 teams within 4 points. It's crazy. So there is a lot of teams that they're not going to want to sell off any assets if they think they're still in the race. So that's going to hold them back. And certainly, if you look to some of the teams that might have a guy, they're in the race with the Sens. They're not going to want to help them out. So it's going to be complicated to see how they address their goaltending. But for right now, Friedge doesn't think that Gibson is the dude. But we'll see how that works. Now, all the drama in Vancouver, according to all the latest reports from Friedman and Pagnotta, etc., that everything is still on the table very much with Miller and Pettersson. There was an interesting article with Ian McIntyre of Sportsnet, who's the one who interviewed the GM, Patrick Allvin, and got those pretty wild comments that he had, things he had to say about Elias Pettersson last week. He's now interviewed Pettersson, and Pettersson has had a chance to speak out for himself. Said a lot of the good things, really. There was nothing too shocking in this interview and comments from Pettersson himself, but essentially acknowledged the fact that he hasn't had a great start to the season, acknowledged the fact that he needs to be better. One of the comments was from Allvin towards Pettersson was that he needs to understand that it's not going to get easier, and he says he does not expect things to get easier. He understands as time goes on, it's only going to get tougher and tougher, and that he's heard all the rumors. He says he can't control it, so he's trying to not think about it and just trying to focus on what he can control. And that at the end of the day, he wants to be in Vancouver. He was asked point blank by McIntyre, do you want to be in Vancouver? And he said, yes, of course. I wouldn't have signed here long term if I didn't want to be in Vancouver. And to be honest, I don't think this has ever been about the fact of him wanting to be in Vancouver or not. It just sounds like the relationship has a lot of toxicity between him and JT Miller. We know, based on what we've heard, it just sounds like JT Miller's a polarizing figure and obviously very passionate, very demanding teammate, demanding a lot of his teammates. And some guys just don't respond to that type of stuff. And Pettersson's a little more sensitive, a little softer from what we've heard. And it's conflicting personalities at the end of the day. So, do they hate each other? No, probably not. But can they move past this too? Is there anything more we don't know? That's the big question. But for right now, all the reports indicate that Pettersson and Miller, they're both on the table. They're scouring the market, and they're either going to trade one, both, or neither, which I know is everything. Everything's out there. So it doesn't really tell us how it's going to go. But one thing that we have not heard, because the one way for the Canucks to put this all to bed would be to come out and say, we're not trading either guy. This is all stupid, crazy, and deny everything. And they haven't done it. They have not done it. And to me, that is very telling. Another player in Vancouver that's interesting to watch is Brock Besser. Rick Dollywall's latest report is that as of right now, considering they've had 7 months since he's been eligible to sign an extension, there's absolutely crickets, quiet on Besser's front. I know his co-host, Don Taylor, suggested, well, maybe because of the issue he had that took him out of the playoffs with the blood clots, and then he had a concussion early in the year. There's Vancouver kind of waiting around where they had health concerns, and he didn't think so. He's like, look what this guy's, he's got the history here, 40, over 40 goals last year. What are they waiting for? Would be rated at the top of the goal list for the team this year again, had he not missed time. So certainly, Dollywall thinks that he should absolutely be part of the future and signed. And they haven't even had any conversation. Apparently, when he was first eligible in July, there was one very quick conversation, and that's as far as it went. So he says that he feels that's telling, and that certainly sounds like there's anything that's far from a guarantee of a future for Besser in Vancouver, but we don't know. Still time to get it sorted. Anything can change with one phone call, as they say, but right now things just don't look promising. But again, lots of time to get it figured out. When it comes to Pagnotta's reports on the Canucks, he had mentioned a couple of things that I found very interesting. He addressed the whole JT Miller to the Rangers reports, because he said there's numerous teams that are, inquiring here, trying to see, either like Pettersson or Miller better, depending on where things are at. He mentions Buffalo, he mentions the Rangers, a few other teams in there. And when it comes to the Rangers, we know that I have no doubt that they'd love to get JT Miller back. But he says that for right now, the belief is that they would want to swap Mika Zibanejad for Miller if that was going to happen. And we also have heard from Friedman saying that the Canucks would absolutely prioritize getting a centerman back if they move one of these guys, because it's going to leave them weaker down the middle. Well, that makes sense, but maybe they don't want Zibanejad. That's a big question. I don't know that they do or they don't, but maybe that's where things are at. According to Pagnotta, if they're going to move Miller to the Rangers, they'd absolutely be asking for Lafreniere. And he said, would the Rangers be willing to do that? That's the big question, right? So Lafreniere, he's certainly slowed down since he signed his big extension. And his former agent, Emily Castonguay, who left the agent business to be in management, of course, an assistant GM with the Canucks. I think there'd be lots of supporters internally there to bring Lafreniere to Vancouver if there was a deal to be made. But at the end of the day, we'll see. But is that what it's going to take for the Rangers to get Miller? Do they do that deal? I think Vancouver would do it. If they could get Lafreniere, I think they do make that trade. That's the big question, though. With the Sabres, it was the same thing. Like, it sounds like the offer was, Byram would be the defenseman that they'd be focused on, and maybe Cousins. And they said, well, it sounds like they probably prefer Owen Power. So again, who are you going to pony up the offers to get one of these guys? Right now Miller would have to waive, and the belief is that the Canucks and Darren Dreger, another insider, said today that they have absolutely not gone to Miller and asked him to waive. And I don't think they would unless they had a deal they really liked and they were ready to proceed. So to me, that's not overly telling. But, he would have to waive. And the belief is that he would consider going back to New York, but that's about it. So they're very limited, right? Whereas Pettersson doesn't have any trade protection until next year. He's also a lot younger, 100-point player. You got to be careful here. You really don't want to, screw yourself out of a, potential what could be a franchise centerman. So, again, proceed with caution, if you will. But those are all your latest news and rumors from around the entire NHL. Busy day here. So I hope you enjoyed all of today's content. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts on everything we discussed here today. Of course, stay tuned if you subscribe if you're new to the channel so you don't miss anything. And I'll catch you next time.